Welcome to the Making Health Dooable podcast. I'm Cheryl Borchardt.
And I'm Sarah Schall.
And together we're your hosts on this journey as you learn what it takes to live well.
We are dedicated to tackling topics that empower you to make massive progress in your health and wellness journey by using our pillars of health: eat well, move well, live well, and respond well.
At Doable Health, our mission is simple: to help everyone live well. As a team of physicians, board-certified health coaches, and law enforcement experts, we're here to serve employees and first responders with coaching, workshops, and masterclasses designed to conquer stress, anxiety, and burnout.
But our dedication doesn't stop there. We're also committed to improving wellness for individuals like you by offering at-home lab testing and personalized coaching to support your unique needs.
Because whether you're an employee, a first responder, or simply an individual seeking better health, we believe that life can feel better for everyone when health is made doable.
So join us as we embark on this journey together, where we'll provide you with the tools, insights, and encouragement you need to thrive.
And stay tuned for enlightening discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice that will inspire you to take charge of your well-being and live your best life.
Until next time, remember, life can feel better when health is made doable.
Before we begin, we have an exciting new offering from Doable Health: at-home lab testing with our integrative health practitioner, Janine Finelli.
I'm Janine Finelli, integrative health practitioner, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, and VP at Doable Health. We offer at-home functional lab testing for individuals to test and not guess when it comes to their health. Whether you are interested in a deep dive under the hood because you love to geek out on numbers and want to really focus on moving forward with prevention, or you have symptoms, brain fog, digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, insomnia, low or no libido, water retention, headaches, all sorts of things that you just cannot figure out where they're coming from, through our at-home functional medicine lab testing with the best of the best labs out there, we can help give you answers. Schedule your initial consult with me so you can test and not guess by going online at doable.com/test. And for a limited time, get 10% off your initial consultation by using the code PODCAST in the checkout screen. doable.com/test.
Welcome to our Making Health Doable podcast. I am Sarah Schall, and we have our guest and actually our host, Cheryl Borchardt. Cheryl is our host with me on the podcast and one who takes the lead most of the time. But we wanted to put her into the visitor's seat and learn from her about anxiety. She's going to help us learn how to get to the root cause of anxiety and what to do when we start to feel those episodes. So before we dive in, let's introduce Cheryl Borchardt. She's a National Board and Functional Medicine Certified Health Coach. Her experience working in integrative medicine and functional immunology has allowed her to gain a vast understanding of the human body and immune system. She works with a variety of male and female clients of all ages to support them as they seek to reverse their autoimmune and chronic health conditions with lifestyle interventions. Her clients say that she has helped them to experience fewer symptoms and live full, enjoyable lives where they can fully participate in the activities they enjoy. And so, Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And you've been the hostess with the mostest for us, and we wanted to give you the opportunity to share something that you're passionate about and very experienced in teaching, because you have actually experienced anxiety in your own life. So you are the perfect model of how it can be manageable and overcome, and you're going to teach us some tips and getting to the root cause of anxieties. All right. So from your own personal experience, we're going to dive into that in a second. I'd love to hear your experiences with anxieties and how you've gotten to the root cause for yourself. But let's dive into the definition of anxiety. It's such a massive topic these days for us, and it affects every generation and every age, children to older adults. So there's no discrimination with anxiety. So please share with us just a general definition, what it is, and then we'll get into your story as well.
Sure. Well, I would say to our listeners, most people who have anxiety know they have anxiety, and they can understand what it feels like. It's almost like a dark cloud that we have that follows us. And it's usually defined as like a worry or a persistent fear that happens over a long period of time and maybe without a cause. Now, there are, reasons that we can have anxiety in our life. And let me just say this, it's very normal for every human to have anxiety at some point. It's when it becomes just so persistent and it never lets up, and it's just like a state that someone's living in. So I think you could look at it like that, where it's just like, this is how I'm living. I'm living in a place of anxiety. So it is very normal to have anxious moments. But yeah, it typically is, I'll say a little bit about one of the things for me is it started for me when I was maybe about 7 or 8 was when I first noticed it, and I didn't know what it was. So for me, I was just really scared all of the time. I was afraid of everything. So just having fear maybe could be something. And we all, as unique as our fingerprint, so we may experience it in different ways. But I would just say if you find that you're living just with this thing you can't get rid of, like it's just there all the time, that would be a concern. To pay attention.
Yeah, I like how you said it's kind of a state. It's not who we are. Like we could kind of label it. We've said before of having anxiety as a disease or an illness. I heard you say it was just a moment of time for you. So kind of share a bit more about that, where it's probably not a label, or it doesn't have to be a label for everybody, and go deeper into that.
So my experience was, it started for me when I was young. I lived with anxiety, not knowing what it was. I think a lot of parents may not know how to recognize it in their children. And so, and kids don't know how to talk about it. That's a thing that's very common. But yeah, it is also, as you grow and you learn and you know what anxiety is, it is a place where you can say, I have anxiety. I have this, like, this is who I am. And that can be really tricky, because is that how you want to be defined? Right? Like we could do that with any, condition or situation or health concern. And that is a big thing, is the label piece of it. So I learned over some time to say, I'm experiencing anxiety, or I'm in a place where my anxiety is, kind of ramped up. And that has helped me not to say, this is who I am and it can never change. Yeah. So I think that's very important to pay attention to, and how we address it with people too.
Yeah. And just kind of a moment of hope. Like there's hope that this isn't who you are or you're stuck with it forever. There is hope that you can get over this moment, possibly with some tools and ideas. And it takes a lot of work, right? It just doesn't happen just because you think it. It takes a lot of work and effort and tools to figure out how to move through it and not let it stay stuck on you. But tell us a little more about your story. So that's really young to experience anxiety. I'm trying to think back to when I was 7 or 8, and I don't think I ever had those feelings. Mine was much older when I first experienced like the physical feelings of anxiety. But I'd love to hear more about, as a child, experiencing something like that, and maybe how that set you up for your teens and older adult.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's something that started very early for me. And it was always present. It was always something I could never really get rid of. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew I felt afraid a lot and scared. And I also was just a very nervous person. So any little things would irritate me and make me anxious. I think part of it, and this can be the case with a lot of people, is like you're afraid you're going to get injured or something really bad's going to happen. So it's like that's where my brain was operating from. So this went on for me until I was in my early 30s. So think about how long that is. And I wouldn't say that it was constant, but it was always there. And I still participated in my life for the most part. I was still had friends and did things, but I was very cautious. And I think that I didn't do a lot of things that I do now because I was afraid. So it kept me from living the kind of life that I wanted to live. And it also disrupted my sleep a lot. So I would have a hard time resting. And so it was into my 30s before I really was like, okay. And it got worse for me too. So it wasn't something that just got better. It would kind of come and go, but it got much, much worse. And it really was like telling me, you need to pay attention. Something's off in your body.
Was it getting worse because you had children that you had to take care of? I think that's sometimes where I experienced anxiety was I had lives that were not just my own and worries that come about. And so I'm sure in your early 30s, I know you have 4 children, just like I do. And I know that kind of every child, it built a bit more worry and a bit more heaviness of what they're doing. And it doesn't get easier when they get older. It probably gets harder because they're out on their own. But what were some of the physical symptoms that you were feeling, or what are some of the things that you're experiencing where you're like, wow, this is really debilitating?
For me, I think for sure having kids made it worse. And I'll tell you what really sent me over the edge was by the time my 4th child was born, I was so sleep deprived just from having kids back to back. So I think that was the thing that really ramped up everything. And I was just at a state of like, I wouldn't say I was having a breakdown, but I really got to the point where everything was really hard for me. And that prompted me to go. So what would happen for me was I would have these acute panic attack episodes where I would just almost be hyperventilating, and I would have like this, it's a feeling of doom if you've ever had it. You just feel like right now everything is ending. Like this is the end for me. And that's a hard place to live because your heart's out of, it's like beating fast and your stress hormones are ramping up. So just like you're nervous, you're shaking. So that's more of a panic attack. So people have different ways they experience anxiety. Some people, again, it's just like this low level thing. Some people have social anxiety. Other people have more of a panic disorder, which is what I had mostly. And so, those symptoms can be different for everybody. And
high blood pressure.
A lot of times what it is more physical symptoms like heart, thoughts, and sweating and breathing, hyperventilating, feeling like you can't get enough breath. Those can all be symptoms that people see. And then sleep disturbances are very common also. And I've worked with tons of people over the years with them on their anxiety. I think because people gravitated to me because they knew of my experience. And so as their coach, they're working with their physician in these medical settings, but they would work with me on some of that as well. And a lot of them had therapists too. Yeah. But I think people appreciated some of the things that I'd learned and tips and tricks that I had used for myself. And they wanted to learn more about how to use those too.
I was thinking as you're sharing all of that about how it takes a village, it takes a group of people to help those experiencing anxiety. And it's not one right solution either. So that's where I think you saying you were working with some clients, they had a doctor, they had a therapist, they have counselors. Like it does take a lot of people to support those who have anxiety and find what's going to work for them. So that's a good lesson in it. The other thing I wanted to share too was you were talking about the panic attacks. And that's something that my oldest daughter has experienced herself. And she's shared her physical symptoms. And it seems to sometimes for her, and I've even heard this from first responders that I've worked with before, that they come in the most odd times when they're least expecting it. Like there's no panic, there's no trauma, there's no craziness happening around them. They may be shopping in the grocery store. I've had some people say they were sleeping and were woken up by the panic feelings. I mean, they go to the hospital thinking they're having a heart attack. And so is that common that it doesn't always happen in the experience that is anxiety driven, but it can come out of nowhere?
Oh, yeah, it does. I've had it both ways. I would say I can just be, or not now, but I can remember times where I'm like cooking dinner. I'm in my house cooking dinner and all of a sudden I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And everything's like closing in. And I think to what you're saying there too is, why does it happen like that? Why does someone wake up from their sleep in a panic and maybe they don't even associate that they had a dream or something? But that can be a good place for us to talk about root causes here.
Wow.
Because, for example, I do know I've had clients with sleep apnea who have these types of wake up episodes in the night. Now, one of the biggest reasons, some of the biggest things that are a root cause for most people are stressful events, traumatic experiences in their lives, things that they maybe replay or remember or never have really dealt with. So those are stressful life events and traumatic events. So those are two big ones.
Right.
Personality traits are a big one. So that is something I feel like is the key for me. Just my type of personality. I tend to be a more cautious person, and that's not a bad thing because that can protect us. And anxiety is meant to be a protector. It's meant to keep us from going into dangerous situations and, just throwing all caution to the wind and being like, hope for the best. So it's a built-in helper for our nervous system, but it's where it gets out of control that it becomes a problem. There can be things like medications that can cause anxiety. Vitamin and mineral deficiencies are another very common one. Hormone imbalances. So that makes a lot of sense. I think that was part for me. That was a little bit, I think I had several root causes going on. Just our lifestyle choices in general, which plays into that lack of sleep for me. So I feel like I had hormonal imbalances. I had some deficiencies. I also had the lack of sleep, which is, it is a lifestyle choice, but at the same time, it's, I couldn't really choose to get up at night with my child. Yeah. Our environment that we live in, that can be one. Ongoing stress. And then even things like toxic things we're exposed to and leaky gut. That was another big root cause of mine that I learned about, not because I was looking for it, but because I went to a doctor who was like, this is probably a big piece of your puzzle as well. Wow. So those were some of my root causes, and everybody's are different. We don't all have the same, and we have to, Coach Janine will appreciate this when she listens. One of the coaches on our Doable Health team, she always says, you got to have your dream team. And it is true, like you were saying, Sarah, like having a good doctor that can help. Medicines are amazing if you need them. They long-term sometimes aren't the solution. They can be a bridge for us as we're doing the healing work and looking for the root causes. But even a lot of times people who have anxiety who are on medications will say they don't feel like it's controlled. So it just tells us it's a piece of the puzzle. And we may need multiple people helping us. So we may need multiple things addressed in our life in order to really resolve and get some wins with this.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I think my first anxiety, I wouldn't call it a panic attack. It was not that severe. But the feelings of anxiety happened to me while at the gym doing yoga.
Well, that's a big one. That happens a lot. It's a very emotional thing for people.
Yep. And I was so oblivious to the depths of it. And I had a background and a history where my dad suffered from a cardiovascular event and had open heart surgery at the age of 45. Yep. So he was super young. So in my head, as I'm getting older, and at the time that I had my first anxiety feelings was like 35, I was like, oh my gosh, am I following in my dad's footsteps? And am I having a heart attack? Like I actually called him on my way home from the gym and I was like, is this what you felt? And so I had to figure out what was going on. I didn't tie it to anxiety right away. I kind of felt like, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. I can't breathe well.
Yeah. That's a great point that you say that, because that is another physical symptom. People will often think that they are having some kind of like cardiac event. Yeah.
Yeah. So he talked me off the ledge and he kind of said, no, I'm sure you're okay. And definitely go talk to your doctor. But he's like, I think you're just feeling anxiety. And I was like, oh, like that was the first thing he said. And he's like, a lot of times we women kind of are misdiagnosed with our heart conditions though, because of it feeling like anxiety versus feeling like a pain down the arm. But anyways, all that to say, that was my first event, was early, like soon after I had my fourth child. So I had my fourth child. We were done nursing. We were done, having children. And I had to put on my investigation glasses about this because I was having cyclical anxieties and even kind of like negative suicidal type thoughts that would come and go though. Like they would come and then I'd be good for a couple weeks. Then all of a sudden this would show up again, these feelings of anxiety and heaviness on my chest and irritability and thoughts that I was like, where is this coming from? And after a couple rounds, I finally discovered for myself, just like putting some pieces together, that it was all based around my cycle, like my menstrual cycle. It was not
even imbalance, you could call it, because as a woman, your cycle is like this throughout the month. So sometimes we are a little bit more prone, and it can depend too on what's going on around us. and what our hormones are doing at that given moment as well.
And yeah, you're so right. It is a gamut of things. It's not just one thing that this was, because I think I had a hormone imbalance because I was done having kids. My body was trying to figure out how to get back to its normal state. I was also cycling. And so it was certain times of that month, I'd hit the luteal phase when our hormones do start to drop and certain things rise. And I was not aligned well. And then also it was when our youngest was diagnosed as hearing impaired and going deaf. And we were trying to make these huge decisions on what we do with her and, procedures and which direction to go. So it was this whole big swirl of stress that my body then started to manifest into anxiety feelings, So it's so true. It's really important for us to look into our story and into our life and our environment. I do think I cleaned up my gut. I ate way less sugar at that point too, to kind of try to help my hormones, and that helped a ton. So yeah, all these root causes, even nutrition, and I'm sure you could share more on the nutrient side and how even sugars can really cause a lot of anxieties in us.
Oh yeah, and even food colorings are another one, especially kids. A lot of times we don't realize how that might be impacting children, so it can show up in a variety of different ways. So, oh yeah, and I have told our listeners, and we've talked about this at every episode, but this is our foundational season for our podcast, to where we're going to really kind of do a high level look at some of these topics in our pillars of health. And we will have the opportunity to dive in more to some of this, some of these root causes, things that we can be doing as we are able to progress throughout our podcast. And so, but sugar, food coloring, those are really big because they can cause neuroinflammation too, and they can affect our gut. And so it's such a delicate balance. And it's funny to think about, I think I had to learn, which makes total sense to me, and it makes sense to you too, but we have all these specialists, but our body is one body. It's all one body. It's not the cardiovascular system that's separate from everything else. Everything is intertwined. So I think if our listeners can remember this as they, get to know our team and get to know how we help people too, is we're always going to strive to help people find their root causes. And we're also going to help people to understand the connections in their body too, so anxiety is not just an emotional thing or a brain thing. It's tied to a lot of other things. Like you were talking about, your daughter was losing her hearing and she's tiny, and that's probably an amazing stressor to you and your family, so that ties back into those life events too. And I think I want to drive that point home, because a lot of times people do have things and maybe they've tucked them away and they think they're not affecting them, so it's a thing to pay attention to, is trying to dive in and go underneath the different layers. And, if something's calling our attention, we need to pay attention, and we need to try to see how we can resolve that.
Well, I know too, when we're in those stressful moments, I know from experience, it's typically about survival sometimes, so you're not thinking about, oh, this must be anxiety. Let me see how I can help this. It's truly like one step at a time, one day at a time. And so I don't think I even considered that stress causing anxiety to me at the time, those physical symptoms. I didn't even consider that until later on, once I got through it and out of it. And I was like, oh, that's probably what that was. And that's where it does help to have people you love around you to help you get through that. And then also maybe help you see different tools and techniques to get through it. So that's what I wanted to ask you next. What are some great, practical strategies and techniques and tools to manage that anxiety?
Well, this can also be, and will be, things we'll dive into a little bit more, but just for some starting places for people, I think it's really important to try to get some testing if you can. Get some testing with your doctor. Just get like a CBC, look at B vitamins, look at vitamin D, look at, some of those things that we know can contribute, iron, thyroid. So I think getting some good blood work. And I would encourage you to get a full thyroid panel, not just a TSH. And also, that might reveal some things. That might bring some things to the surface, because we want to look at those biological reasons that somebody could be having anxiety. there are even things like micronutrient tests that we can have. So what those look at is not just what our blood says, because a lot of times these nutrients are in our cells and they're not just going to show up, so we might be deficient somewhere and not really realize it. So that can be a micronutrient test can be a really great one. So now if somebody knows that they're having an issue from a stressful event or a trauma that happened to them or something that they're currently living in, I would definitely encourage them to think about, is there anything they can do to get out of this environment if they're currently in something, or if it's something that they dealt with in the past? Have they seen a therapist? Have they talked through this with somebody? I had some things that were more patterns of beliefs and, the anxieties that were associated with that and fears that I had to do therapy for. And I used cognitive behavioral therapy for that,
right?
Which was amazingly helpful. And in that, I learned a lot of stuff that I still use to this day. And I will say I've only had 1 or 2 kind of anxiety panic episodes in probably 10 to 12 years. So that to me is huge because it was very transformational.
I
would say, go ahead.
Quick overview, and we could probably do another podcast about this one, but a quick overview of the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, so cognitive behavioral therapy is an opportunity to go in and to process through and learn. It's really about learning techniques and things that you can do to overcome what you've experienced. So it's pretty in-depth. There's a few different types of behavioral therapy like that. I learned, a lot of it too, and I won't say it's a problem with trusting, but I think, at the base of it, a lot of times is a fear. And it's something that's out of our control. And I think for me, I had to just also learn life is hard. Life is out of my control a lot of the time. And that right there, processing it, not just that sentence, but living it, processing it, learning how to apply that to my life and to help me know, listen, I'm not the only person who suffers in these ways. And to know that it just helps to me. Yeah. It helps to know okay, humans suffer. Humans don't have control of their situations most of the time. And things happen that are out of our control. So that was a whole different thing for me and part
belief
of my
system
faith as well. Yeah, for
really
sure.
Tapping into belief system and mental health in that way.
Yeah. But there are also things like meditations and some, even somebody who is unsure of doing a meditation, like if that's something that you've never tried, can be very helpful. And they've actually shown that it can be as effective as medications for anxiety, which I think are about 30%. Medications are typically about 30% effective, and meditation can be as well. So breathing exercises, because what happens is we're in that fight or flight, especially if we're having a panic attack, we get into this space where nothing we can do can help us to come out of it. But if we can incorporate some breathing exercises that just calm down the nervous system and calm down that response, it helps the body to be able to relax a little bit. So there are tips like that are very helpful. And then for me too, the biggest piece was healing my gut because I'd had a lot of infections as a child. So that bacterial balance in your gut, mine was tipping into the, more problematic and what I would call more opportunistic things were dominating in my gut. And I didn't have a lot of the good things, the things that help our neurotransmitters and the things that we make most of our neurotransmitters in our gut, like 80%, not just in our brain again. So that's a connection. So that for me, being able to eradicate some of the opportunistic things that were in my gut and bringing in the good bacteria transformed me in a matter of 2 months.
Wow.
So again, all of it is working together in a synergy. It's not just this, that, or the other. I'm not just doing one thing, but the combination of all of that. So I would encourage people to look at different things, especially once they kind of know some of their root causes. that will determine also some of the tips and tricks and
Which technique might help.
therapies, that they would use.
Yeah. I mean, breathing is such a massive and easy one that we definitely forget. I mean, I catch myself all the time holding my breath just while working, so I'm sure that it's causing some imbalances in my brain. Maybe if I'm thinking negatively, I'm like, I just need to breathe too. But breath work is important. Meditation's important. Nutrition is a big one. Give us one tip as we close out today that's practical that somebody could implement today. And kind of, you said you saw results just by treating the good bacteria in your gut in 2 months. What is it that you did, maybe, that you implemented that could help our audience?
This would be my number one thing, because most of us could stand to improve our guts in general, just because the things that, even drinking chlorinated tap water kills our good gut bacteria. So, we got to think from a space of, if I could, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but eating fermented foods or taking a really high quality probiotic. So we eat fermented foods pretty much every single day. We rotate ours. So we like kimchi, sauerkraut. We sometimes do kefir and fermented pickles. We try to get a lot of different bacteria. So that is my tip. And I give that in my circles too. So we do these circles master classes with Dooable. And I've been teaching on anxiety for the past several months. And that is one of my number one things I tell people to do is try to include some probiotic foods. So you will find those in the refrigerator sections. You can email us. We'll give them to you. We'll give you some brands and things like that if you like. So,
I'm grateful for your experience and the way that you've used your life story to help others and inspire yourself to become better. And then now teaching others how to deal with their anxieties and the overwhelming thoughts and feelings and how we can manage this and not let it label us and become something we are stuck with. So thank you for your experience, your expertise, you sharing. We need to definitely go deeper into some of these. So these will be for future podcasts. But yes, if you guys have any questions, please email our team. We would love to help you answer those in whatever way we can. But thank you, Cheryl, so much for sharing today. I really enjoyed it and look forward to more.
Happy to. Thank you. As we wrap up another insightful episode of Making Health Doable, we want to express our gratitude to you for joining us on this journey toward better health and wellness.
At Doable Health, we're not just a podcast. We're a dedicated team of physicians, board-certified health coaches, and law enforcement experts.
And together, we're on a mission to serve employees and first responders, providing coaching workshops and masterclasses tailored to conquer the challenges of stress, anxiety, and burnout.
But our commitment doesn't stop there. We're also passionate about improving wellness for individuals like you, offering at-home lab testing and personalized coaching to support your unique needs.
Because at the end of the day, whether you're an employee, a first responder, or simply an individual striving for better health, we're all human. And we firmly believe that life can feel better for everyone when health is made doable.
So as you go about your day, remember that you're not alone on your journey toward wellness. We're here to support you, encourage you, and provide you with the tools you need to thrive.
So stay tuned for more inspiring conversations, expert insights, and actionable advice in our future episodes. Be sure to like and subscribe on your podcast platform.
And don't forget to visit our website at doable.com, DOOABLE.com, for additional resources and updates. Until next time, remember that health is within reach.
And together we can make it doable.